And thanks for being here. I'm going to very quickly switch to the PowerPoint presentation for today, and then we'll get through that uber quickly so we can go to the discussion. So here we go. Uber quickly, I like that. So this Hope intervention and all of them seem to be brought to you from TILT, the Institute for Love and Time. You can find out more at gotilt.org/hope-intervention. And we're really grateful to the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation for helping support our project. This is session 8, Possible Futures, Control, and Agency. And this is how we think it's going to go. First, we'll do about 2 minutes just to get some visuals to help inform the discussion that we'll be having. We think it would be useful. We'll see how that goes. Then we'll probably have about 13 minutes of discussion between myself and Dr. Shapiro about these topics. Then a Q&A in the chat window or breakout sessions. What we're betting is that Q&A might work better, but if people are wanting breakout sessions, we'll do that. Then we'll have a chime at 29 minutes to indicate that we're getting towards the end, and we'll have the final summary statement and homework. So hopefully you might be familiar with this graph that we've been using since I think about Hope Intervention 2. We've got time in the sort of linear sense going on the x-axis there from left to right, and your life experience being at a high point and a low point, and your well-being not yet plotted on this graph, but it's going to be in green, and this is the axis for the well-being. And here's where we are now. That's our present moment at this triangle, which is a very important point because that is all we can experience. And yet we can pull in these moments that are also on our curve. So we talked about the Iroquois, this is the Iroquois flag, and the idea of the long body in time. So here's the long body in time. It's encompassing all of these things, all of these, this what we would call the past self relative to this present self, the future self relative to the present self, and it has pulled in these moments so that in the present moment, you don't feel alone. You feel like you're connected to these other parts in time. And what that can do, and the Iroquois flag I think is really cool because it looks almost like that. Here's the present moment and here are these connected moments. Not that that's what it's supposed to mean, but that's what it means to me. What that can do is pull up your well-being so that your well-being is actually higher than the average of these because the road is essentially less bumpy. You don't have to go down into this pothole because you can pull these with you. And the idea of control and agency, I think this figure is helpful. So if this is our present moment, we've already been through these experiences. Here's a moment in the past. Here's our well-being because we're practicing this hope intervention experience. We're practicing the long body, so our well-being is way up here. The reason it's up there is not because we got the life circumstances to be the least bad that they could be, this top line. And we somehow chose between these three possible or an infinite number of possible universes where the life circumstances go really bad and then come back up, or slightly bad or not so bad. But it's because in each case we've pulled into ourselves these local maxima, these points in the future relative to now that are an improvement. And we've pulled them in, no matter how far away in time they are, and we have lifted ourselves up. So that when people talk about control and agency, they're often talking about how do I make this future path be the best one. And as you'll hear in my discussion with Michael, at least my opinion is that's not a thing that you do. The thing that you do is you, regardless of which path you're on, you pull in this local maxima. And those could be from the past. So that's a brief introduction to what we're doing here today. And Michael, did it work to make you co-host? No, it didn't. Okay, I'm sorry then to those people who were just coming in from the waiting room. I thought Michael was letting people in, but apparently the co-host thing didn't work. So you're in now. And I just gave yeah. I'm sorry to those people who just came in. I just gave a brief introduction and a visual that we'll talk about anyway in our discussion. So I don't think that you missed anything crucial.
Oh, it felt crucial to me. It was good. It's so many good ideas there.
Well, so what felt crucial to you about that?
Well, as a clinical psychologist, the work I do with patients is exactly what we're talking about. And what you and I prepped, it was the concept of surrender and acceptance. And that's where agency becomes the most important, is I'm going to surrender and accept. And so I like that spread out graph that you had, the three, because often we do want to control which path we're going to be on. I don't want to go that far down, or I really want to have it be, I hear a lot of my patients talking about, I'm visualizing this best outcome, and which is fantastic. And I ask what it feels like, but then it doesn't happen. And then there's a sense of failure, a sense of disempowerment, as if they just did something wrong. There's something wrong with them for not manifesting this path. So it's the hope is really in going, let me bring it all together right here in the present moment and really accept what's happening and surrender to any outcome, because I know I can get through any of them.
Yeah, I think it's so key that we say that. Like, the two things I think are so key. So I'm so glad you said it that way. Two things I think are so key. One is that we remember that the hope is not in control. Like this, we could argue all day over whether we have control over the future. And I think what really depends is what you mean by I. Like when people say, do I have control over the future? It's like, well, what are you including in I? It's like, here's how I think of it. I think of it one cell, like if this particular cell right here in my hand, which I sort of relate to the present moment. The present moment is just like one cell in your body, right? So if this cell in my hand started saying, "Oh, I really want to become a liver cell. Like that's really what I want to do, and I'm just going to visualize being a liver cell, and it's going to be awesome, and I can't wait till I'm like processing blood, and it's going to be so great, and I'm going to be a liver cell." Like the rest of the body is like, what? Like that's not helpful to anyone else. That's not in the plan, and it's not going to work because you're a hand cell. That's where you are in the body. So this cell is much better off going, oh, I'm a hand cell. Okay, I get it. I'm surrounded by other hand cells. I do think I do things in the hand. Like the hand is pretty important, and that's okay. And I love myself for being a hand cell. And then you move on to the next cell, and oh, guess what? It's also a hand cell because it's connected to that hand cell. I feel like that's what wanting to have control from one moment in time is like. It's like a hand cell wanting to be a liver cell. It's you don't know what the right you're not acting like you know what the right thing is, because obviously the right thing would be to really do well what you are. But second, you're not in control of whether you're a hand cell or a liver cell. You are where you are. So yeah.
In Buddhist psychology, we would call that a delusional temperament, a delusional personality that doesn't see clearly, and then therefore leads to a lot of extra suffering.
But that's very common. I mean, so it's not
for all of us. Yes.
Yeah, that's we all slip into that, right?
That's correct.
Yeah.
And I personally believe we have impact, and our agency is what helps us create impact. And our colleague Cassie Veaton and I often teach about creating the conditions to make the future we're hoping for more likely to manifest with all the right conditions, with all the conditions. So
yeah, this is where we differ. Let's talk about this.
Yes. So what we're saying is there's a intention we're creating of a future. We'd like to have vibrancy, thriving. Perhaps we want to be surrounded by good friends or community. These things are actually possible, but it doesn't happen by will or force alone. So in our paradigm, we have a whole list of conditions. Like we have to have practices, and we have intentions, and we have community support, we have teachers, all of these conditions in place to make the future we're hoping for more likely to manifest with the universe. We can't control it or manipulate it into creation, but we can create the context and create the conditions that it's more likely that possibility will arise.
And then when it doesn't happen, sometimes the work is not to blame yourself, right? Because right. If you blame yourself, it's like saying you have total control.
Yeah, we know we're starting from the vantage point we have almost no control except for how we can create the best as we can, the conditions to support the vision of the future we want to have arise.
So I don't think we totally differ on that. I think the definition that it's really comes down to the definition of when you say we, who we are. So like the present moment, here's my stance. I've been thinking about that a lot, of course, because of this conversation, but the present moment I think has agency. And what agency is I did something. It's about the past, right? I think I could do something in the future because I did something in the past. I moved my hand like this. I did that. Like, there's no doubt that Julia did this with her hand. Like, we have the video now, right? So I definitely have agency in the present moment, in the sense that I could do things. It's always, of course, your experience of the things is always in the past, but and your experience of agency is based on past things. But I don't think that, and I think that you can predict that you will do things in the future if you don't die, right? Or even if you do die, depending on how you feel about survival of consciousness, right? So doing things to me is what agency is. Like saying, I'm the one who did that thing, and it wasn't my brother, and it wasn't my sister, it was me. I did the thing, right? Control seems to me to be about saying, I get to choose what I get to choose what I do. And I think that is true from the point of view of the whole self over time, from the moment you were born to the moment you die. I think that whole long body self has control over what it does. But at any particular moment in time, I don't think that's true. I think that the more we think of the present moment as a special case where we get to do whatever we want, but the past is locked down and the future is locked down, that is a special form of delusion, I think, where all of a sudden, like a cell decides, oh, I'm in charge of the whole body. So I think that is why I think it's so important to identify with the long body in time, because then you do have some kind, not all control, because still you only have a little bit of control. You're just you're not the whole universe. But it leads to being identified with the whole universe, because you're extending yourself in time, and then you end up extending yourself in space. So anyway, I think the only difference between our approaches is the definition of who we are.
Well, that there's a thing in the chat window. Do we want to hold off on that?
Let's hold off on that, and why don't you
Cool.
respond? Yeah.
Well, from the non-dual perspective that I come from, we are the universe acting at all times, all of it happening through this container of the body, mind, organism, this complex of brain, body, spirit, psyche. My experience and my theology, I would say, is that the universe is acting through me, creating itself, creating reality through me, through Mike. My issue is when I bond to just Mike himself and try to be really rigidly controlling of what's happening, not realizing the universe is actually influencing almost everything. And so then I get really rigid and upset or fearful. I find myself struggling with reality because I think I can't control it, but I'm really trying hard to control it. And so when I find that actually the empowerment comes when I let the universe flow as it does, knowing it's using me, going through me. And then I will have, Mike as a human has reactions to the present moment. But again, coming back to accepting this is what it is right here, this moment. And then I can surrender to whatever path is laid forward, because I know I've already been through it. And I know I've been forward and backward. I've already been through it in the past. And I know I've already been through it going forward too. So that lifts me up to that well-being line where I can rest a little bit more. Doesn't mean I like what's happening in the present moment or prefer it. It means I can rest in that line, which, like, as you said last week, that long, those long treads of let's say a tank, or, that goes over a small hole, but it has a long, that you can rest in that then.
Yeah, see, that's my experience too. But what I think is interesting is we're agreeing, but you're bringing up the importance, I think, of connecting in space, like saying I'm not alone here. It's the whole universe that's coming through me. And I'm bringing up the importance of connecting in time. But we both think the other thing is important. We're just sort of coming at it from two different directions. And I think that's exactly, those are our natures. I think my nature is to sort of think about time first, and then to bring, space. And I think your nature is to think about the connectivity in space and bring, oh yeah,
Mm-hmm.
time. And so I
Mm-hmm.
think we're just
Mm-hmm.
highlighting the two different directions, and it's important to do both, but it's not cognitive. I worry that when we have these discussions, people will think, okay, great, now I have to do these things with my mind. But I feel like it's more like a description rather than a prescription. I feel like this is what it feels like when you feel loved.
Mm-hmm. And it's a feeling in the body for me. And for when I lead patients, I'm often asking, and it seems rude if you don't know me, if you're working with me, to hear me say this. I'm like, do you mind not talking for a second? So, and if we're really close, I could be like, could you shh? So I get because they're conceptually trying to understand something that's actually alive in the body. It's a felt sense. And so quite often, I ask to drop into the body where the feeling is present, and that long body can be felt. I did it this morning in meditation. I told you I'm facing something that makes me really nervous and afraid, and I went back, I went forward, and my body expanded in space, actually, as large
Yeah.
awareness. And then I felt this sense of well-being arising in this large space. And
Yeah.
so for me, that's where this is actually felt and most uh, vivid.
Yeah. All right. I think we basically agree. And it feels, but that can't be said enough, that it's in the body, and that
Mm-hmm.
to me, that it's a connection with the universe that allows you to have this experience, but it's not
Mm-hmm.
like you even control having the experience. It just happens.
Well, I can create the conditions that it's more likely to happen.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
right, right.
Absolutely. But it's not like you go, okay, now I'm going to have the experience.
Oh, correct. Yes. No, I'm hoping that the meditation I'm doing and the work that I'm doing will elicit this thing. And if it doesn't, I can also surrender. Okay, I'm still in my small body. I'm very afraid or upset.
Yeah.
And that's what I have right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, cool. All right. Should we do chat window stuff?
Let's do it.
All
Let's
right.
do
So
it.
if someone really strongly wants to do breakout rooms, would you type that in the chat window? Otherwise, we're just going to go for the chat window thing. I know we said we'd take a vote, but votes are often difficult. So if you have really strong feelings and no one has feelings in the other direction, you let us know. So someone is saying your choices can influence the universe to some degree, but there's also a role for chance, for God, for fate, for other people, for
Mm-hmm.
circumstances outside our control. We can only control our choices and reactions.
Mm-hmm.
No? All right. Well, do you want to talk to this? Because I know my answer.
Oh, let's hear your answer. I love it.
Oh, the last question. We can only control our choices and reactions. No? It depends on what you mean by we. So if you're saying the person in the present moment, no, you cannot. My experience is I cannot control either my reactions or my choices or frankly anything I'm doing. So the universe is moving through me, and that's the situation, and I am not in control. If you're talking about the person extended over time and space, identified with yourself from the moment you're born to the moment you die, and identified with the universe, yeah, sure, then you have control because now you're identified with all that is.
You don't believe you have control over choice in the moment to go one way or another way?
No,
Because
there's
that's what that
no
reads.
evidence for that. There's no neuroscientific evidence for people's conscious minds to have control. We're constantly driven by whatever happened in the past, even the last 2 seconds. Our unconscious minds are making decisions for us that are then giving us a sense of agency in our conscious awareness that we had, um, which is totally healthy and totally fine. I'm not saying that's bad. I'm just saying, like, in reality, when we say we, like my present moment conscious awareness, no, it's a storyteller. It's a storyteller about experience. It's like a puppet, like a hand puppet saying, I've got control, I've got control. Who's saying that? I've got control, I've got control. Who's saying that? The hand is making the puppet say that. That's what it's like. So that's what I think.
It's interesting. I love watching all your faces, by the way.
Me
I
too.
love it. I'm so glad to be here with all of you. Honestly, it's really nice to have this community to 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 ponder these things and drop into our bodies and feel this stuff out. Well, there's so much stuff coming out on our. Let's try to get to some of this, Julia.
Well, did you want to respond to that, or do you want to just go forward?
Well, there's so much here to talk about because
Yeah.
that's a really fascinating concept. And I often teach on something called making mounds into mountains,
Mm.
where we're walking in present moment and we see a mound before us. And because of our past experience, and I work with PTSD, this is one of my specialties, we often project our past experiences onto the future, not only the present, but onto the future. So we see a circumstance or something's coming and we project this mountain that we had to scale before that was very difficult. And it's only a mound. It's only something like a friend said something that hurt us, but it triggers all this response from what we've already been through. And so we're often looking forward, just reliving the past. So everything forward becomes an illusion. So that's where I can understand what you're talking about. Like, we don't have choice in the moment because we're projecting the past in front of us. However, the work I do suggests that we actually can stop into the present moment and see what's happening and then make another decision to not be doing that unconsciously. So for me, there does feel like there's a choice. We're slowing down. I'm going, oh, I'm projecting. Let me do something different. And in that, let me do something feels like agency and choice.
Yeah,
Not control, but
I
agency.
totally agree that it feels like agency. And it is agency. You did something, and there's no doubt that you changed what you did and then you did something else. I'm just saying, all I'm saying that's different is I don't think the present moment conscious mind has control over that. That I'm going to stop and change and do something different is being controlled almost by definition by other factors, because the present moment conscious mind just arises in the present moment. How could I have control over a change that started occurring before it existed? You see what I mean?
I'm
I feel,
trying to. It's
yeah,
deep. I have to. I
it's
have to.
deep.
Okay, so many good things over here.
Yeah. Okay. What happens when your higher self moves into your body occasionally or more permanently? I guess we're not doing a meditation today. We usually do a meditation. I think it's
Mm-hmm.
important to get to these questions. Are you okay with that?
Yeah, let's do this. Is wonderful. So glad to interact.
Yeah. What happens when your higher self moves into your body occasionally or more permanently? Um, so that question is based on the model that your higher self is not in your body. Um, so that's an interesting idea, that your higher self's not in your body. Um, that your higher self has a location at all is an interesting idea. So I don't think of the higher self as in the physical universe. So things in the physical universe have a location, but things that aren't in the physical universe don't have a location. So like the higher self, or the feeling of love, or thoughts and ideas, where are they? They are, you can't point to them. They don't have a location. So I don't understand the question of what happens when your higher self comes into your body, because it's everywhere, right? Just like everything that's not physical. I don't know. What do you think, Michael?
Yeah, from my non-dual perspective, there is nothing outside of whatever we might want to define higher self, but I think we understand. So it's always already present. It's, for me, a matter of turning our conscious human attention to it. It's already there. It's like having a foggy window. Um, the scene outside is already present. It's not there just because the window's foggy. And eventually in our practice, in my practice, there is no window. It's you eventually see that the window is an illusion and the outside and inside are all the same thing, always co-occurring.
Yeah. And so that someone was writing that it's the awareness that comes into the body. And that's the magic of the present moment. I think the present moment is highlighting for us. I mean, I feel like the present moment highlights for us, this is what's happening. I mean, it's like magic. It's like, this is exactly what's happening. Look around, like, this is what's happening. This is what's happening. Just this very thing, just this very moment. And it becomes like magic or sacred or holy. Here it is. And that's what the present moment confers. But to me, that's the opposite of control. That's the opposite of being able to do something. Whatever you're seeing already happened. It's what's happening. It's a blessing to see what is, and to love what is, whatever that is. And that's what connects you over time.
And it's loving what is. You we end up knowing we have a body brain complex that is called Mike or Julia. But in what we discover is the we is love itself, loving. When I was with my teacher at the end of a long retreat, we had a picture together and we were both vibrant next to each other. And the caption he wrote was love, loving, love.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the present magic of the present moment, right?
Yes, right,
That's what we
right.
can do here. That is the thing that we can do is love, loving, love. And it's done through us. Yeah.
There's a social justice question there, which I'd like to read.
Where is that? Where do you see that?
Oh, it's, I don't want to mention the name just because we're being recorded, but a couple from the bottom, just about privilege and
Yes.
choice of having privilege.
Black
There's a
Lives Matter. Yes.
just want to think about that in this context.
Absolutely. Some of us kind of, so there's, depending on the life you've had. So there are times in my life, many times in my life where when I mean, personally, I could speak to personally, not in good places and could never imagine that it would be empowering to experience lack of agency and to experience being connected to the universe in this way because I felt like I needed control. And I had to do a lot of work to get through that personally, and definitely not as much work as someone who didn't have as much privilege would have had to do. So I could completely imagine taking that and then amplifying it by 1,000. But I can't exactly put myself in that person's shoes because it didn't happen to me, you know. So I can imagine that, but I can't imagine it well, you know. And so all I can say is that love, God, universe got me through that, and I'm grateful.
I think in a very real relative sense, those who suffer from oppression, marginalization, have a lot more work to do in the relative human sense because there's so many conditions that make it much more difficult to do this luxury of introspection. It's true. And at the same time, the access to universe, love, and God is equal at all times for every human being. And I think when we read Viktor Frankl and people who have suffered, you know, from extreme circumstances, finding that same love points to the immediacy of God, love, universe being present. But I do think from a social justice point of view, there are a lot more conditions that people face, the more layers of oppression that are put on them in our true human experience.
And someone pointed out it also can feel rough to have privilege and then feel like one should be at a certain place or one should have more control and then doesn't feel it. So there's all sorts of ways to do this and to think about this. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen because as much as I would just like to basically hang out for the next half hour and talk about this, we have a commitment to try to be on time. So our summary statement for today is whether there are many possible futures or just one, whether our experiences are predetermined or completely under our control, in each moment we have one experience. How can we honor that experience? By connecting it in an indivisible thread with its past and future, and by identifying with the thread. So it's interesting. I just anticipated we would be talking about this control stuff, so that worked, I guess. Every morning, so here's the homework. Every morning, connect with that evening self and ask for support. Every evening, connect with that morning self and ask for forgiveness. So this is about acknowledging that we don't always work well through time, and that's okay. Mm-hmm. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.
See you next week.
See you next week.